We will now hear from Rob's wife, who just happens to be the minister at Godalming Unitarians, Rev Sheena Gabriel. Sheena has facilitated meetings on climate change at her own chapel and at interfaith meetings. She's been a great help in putting this evening's event together, not least for volunteering Rob to take part. Thank you, Sheena. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you. I hope you can all hear me. We're testing that with Rob being downstairs, it's making the Wi-Fi challenging, but hopefully you can hear me. So yes, Rob, my husband, who has been arrested twice, he's got the story. I'm the support act. My involvement with XR is more peripheral. I'm not a natural rebel. I'm more of a contemplative than an activist, but that's why I ended up getting under XR's flag, because the natural world where I find so much solace is being irrevocably destroyed, and I'm realizing my culpability. And it was when XR started renting our Unitarian hall in Godalming 18 months ago that I started seeing their flag and thinking, what's this about? Their weekly meetings clashed with meditation. We were in the chapel meditating, they were in the hall doing what they do. And I'd sometimes drop by and say a quick hello, and I got talking to them. And then when two chapel members I respect got involved and started giving the talks, I went to what Mark has shown us. It ruined my evening, but I knew XR were truth tellers. Since then, I've stayed in the background. I've not glued myself to any buildings or been arrested. I reason one in the family is enough. And I only managed to get to London once during the October 19 rebellion, taking food to the rebels in Vauxhall Park. And this September, just a socially distanced marched in Godalming. I've not got involved for various reasons, which sound a bit feeble. A busy ministry, not enough time or energy. My flock depend on me, I can't get myself arrested. Excuses, perhaps, but I do what I can. And alongside encouraging those who are on the front line and donating money, one thing I can do as a minister is use the pulpit to spread the word. In March, last Sunday before lockdown, we had an eco-themed service and a vegan lunch, and then I invited the congregation to stay on to watch the presentation. There was initial reluctance from trustees who thought it was just too political and divisive. But I persuaded them. We widened the event out to include other eco groups. So XR was a choice amongst other groups. And they went for it. And eyes were opened. Again, in March, I organised an event for a local Interfaith Forum with 4 speakers of different faiths, all involved with XR. Again, initial resistance, but the forum trusted me. Not sure why, but they did. And the evening helped dispel myths that XR followers are all uncooperative crusties occupying heaving hemp bivouacs. I'm more of a pastor than a prophet. I find it easier to comfort the afflicted than afflict the comfortable, especially during a pandemic. I want to offer solace, but I don't want the pandemic to be an excuse to pretend the climate emergency has disappeared. And of course, the two things are linked inextricably. Supporting XR has caused a few waves for me as a minister. I remember the first time Rob was arrested. He promised me he wouldn't be, but he was. And he didn't make it home in time for meditation that night, and I let slip what had happened. Some folk were supported, a few of them were aghast. It became a bit fractious. All those misinformed headlines from the right-wing press. I tried to empathise, but one person walked out. And I thought, what's my role as a minister? Should I keep quiet about these things? I still don't know. I try to find that middle line. The second time Rob was arrested, this year when he really promised me this time he wouldn't be, he made it back just in time to do meditation, and we decided discretion was the better part of valour. Some of the meditation folk commented on the hypocrisy of the XR folk turning up in their cars, but they missed the point. XR supporters are not perfect. They're on a journey towards a greener lifestyle. They haven't all arrived. Like me, I could hold my hands up and say there are so many ways in which my lifestyle is not sufficiently green. So I have no right to talk about climate crisis until my own house is in order. But if I wait for that, it will be too late. So I do what I can, knowing it's not enough. XR highlights how governments, world leaders, the oil and business magnates shift the blame onto us consumers. They put the onus on the little people to recycle and watch our carbon footprint, to cover up their own dirty behaviour. XR expose this web of deceit and call on ordinary people to rise up and take back power. But as an XR supporter, you don't have to agree with all their actions. Like the suffragettes and the suffragists, there's sometimes disputes about how far to take civil disobedience. Individuals and small groups occasionally go AWOL, and then that gets in the press. But should this undermine the whole cause? At the moment, many people say that XR is too white, too middle class. I hear those arguments in our Unitarian movement. But my husband, as a white, privileged, middle class male, recognises his privilege, and he acts on behalf of those who can't afford to do likewise. And for all these attacks on XR, to the critics I'd say, those whose wealth depends on exploiting the earth want to divide all of those who care about the planet, because they know a house divided against itself cannot stand. If XR can be dismissed as criminal by the right-leaning and toxic by the left-leaning, then the energy for change is dissipated. That's why I stand behind them. I slip into denial often. I don't want my comfortable life disturbed. But like Adam and Eve, eating from the tree of knowledge and discovering their nakedness, I can't carry on as normal. Of course, we could look at all the ways that religion has contributed to the mess we're in. World leaders still insist it's their God-given right to drill for oil and coal as fires rage. It breaks my heart that my own family include good people who think climate change is fake news created by lefties and see freak weather as a punishment sent by God. We need a new form of religion, a new form of spirituality that many are waking up to. The spirituality of the earth. As Indigenous peoples do, we need to see the earth as ensouled. Because if you truly love something and someone, you don't abuse them. As Dr. Gail Bradbrook, the co-founder of XR, writes, let's be lovers. This is not our Mother Earth. This is our lover Earth. I've been slow to awake, so slow. St. Augustine, 1500 years ago, lamented his slow awakening to God's love. Late have I loved you, O beauty, ever ancient, ever new. You called, you shouted, and you broke through my deafness. You flashed, you shone, you dispelled my blindness. I could paraphrase that. Late have I loved the earth, beauty, ever ancient, ever new. You flashed and you shone in every leaf and fin and feather, and you dispelled my blindness. And with this awakening, I find myself crying a lot. When I see the footage of a scrawny polar bear rummaging for scraps far from his mountain home, or David Attenborough's programme on extinction, the last two remaining white northern rhinos, mother and daughter. And the Zen monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, when asked, what do we most need to do to save our world? He answered, what we most need to do is hear within us the sounds of the earth crying. When we learn to hear that, we discover that our pain for the world and our love for the world are one and are made stronger. What we most need to do is to hear within us the sounds of the earth crying. For me, God is that extraordinary consciousness, intelligence, that loving, living intelligence that I found in creation. And its destruction feels all the more awful as I realise my complicity in trashing the work of the most prodigious artist. Every time I bin that non-recyclable plastic, knowing it could end up in the stomach of a beautiful sea creature, or I eat something made from non-sustainable palm oil and see the face of an orphaned orangutan. I grew up with original sin drummed into me, and I rejected the notion and became a Unitarian. I'm now moving back towards that position of accepting there's something in me that rebels not so much against Father God in heaven, but the mother and lover of all life. And I sin daily, caught up in economies and duplicities and systems beyond my control. As James George says, a new order on earth will not begin until we all learn to see the pollution in our own hearts. And that will not happen until a critical mass experience with remorse a real change of consciousness. And this is where I think our spiritual communities and XR overlap. As Reverend Maria Curtis here today so eloquently explored in her anniversary service last year, Joanna Macy talks of the great turning, the ecological revolution that could save us, where three things are needed. 1, holding actions to slow down or stop the damage. 2, a radical change of lifestyles and structures. 3, a change of consciousness. And that dovetails nicely with that other trinity, XR's 3 demands. Tell the truth, act now, go beyond politics. In snatched moments, I try to take my lead from Mary Oliver. My work is loving the world, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished, because it's only when I love the world that I can act. I don't know if it's already too late, but as Rowan Williams, who Rob sat down nearby this September, writes in XR's handbook, it might just work. It might allow a new space and a new imagination to flower in the face of incipient tragedy, a new hope and dignity for human agents, not least among the young. Change the narrative and who knows what is possible. Accept the diseased imagination of the culture we've created, and the death count begins now. Anger, love, and joy may sound like odd bedfellows, but these are the seeds of a future that will offer not success, but life. That's Rowan Williams. He gives me hope. Greta Thunberg gives me hope. The little band in Godalming give me hope. Folk in wheelchairs and 92-year-olds risking arrest give me hope. XR rising up in love and rage give me hope. And I'd like to end with an extract from the last letter in this book, Letters to the Earth. Words by Claire Roussel. They are wanting to tell us something, the future people, that what we do now matters. They want us to know they see the dismembered ways we live, how difficult it is for us to remember how to return to the family of things. But their existence is testament to the fact that it is possible. They know we feel trapped by this system of entanglements, obligations, and the amputations of our imaginations. But they want to remind us there was a time when we knew what it was to belong, when we knew we were the firefly and the ocean, the stuff of stars and the breath of birds. They ask us, how did you know that something else was possible? Tell us the story of summoning your brothers and sisters to revolt for a life of connection and dignity. The future people ask us, how did you manage to build this world in the flames of capitalism, all the while disconnected from the rhythms and songs of your people? How did you handle knowing all you know without becoming paralyzed with terror and despair? How did you carry its magnitude in your heart without becoming overcome with madness, or perhaps whilst carrying your addictions and chronic sadness, without knowing the extent of your vitality? Did you carry pieces of it stuffed in pockets and purses? Did you feel it hanging in the air, walking alongside you, the ghosts of extinct creatures reminding you of all that is at stake? Did you taste it in your food, forced from the soil and sea with chemicals and violence? Did you feel the suffering as you dressed yourself in the forced labour of people and animals, their exhaustion stitched into the seams of your clothes? We, the future people, see you standing on the shore with 500 years of industry and environmental wreckage gasping under its weight. We see you holding the crumbling world in one hand and the germinating seed of life in the other. And we know you are listening to your children, to the wind, to the harbingers of a new consciousness. We feel how you allow your heart to be broken, while every day preparing the house for love, setting a place for her at your table, all with no good reason to hope and every reason to despair. We see what is to come for you and what will remain when the storm from which there is no refuge is over. We know what you are capable of. We future people, we salute you, because what you do now matters. Some words by Claire Roussel. What I do matters. What you do now matters. What we do now matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheena. I think that resonated with a lot of my own thoughts. Thank you.